Mr. President, it's that time again on the Senate floor when I get to recognize someone special from my state, someone we refer to as the Alaskan of the Week, someone who makes our state, our great state of Alaska, in my opinion, the best and most unique state in the country. I know it's the Page's favorite speech of the week as well. I don't think you're going to be disappointed on this one, the young men and women here working as pages. Now, some may take issue with the claim of the most unique state in the union, but consider this, Mr. President, right now, we have teams of mushers and their dogs who are barreling 900 miles across the state of Alaska toward the city of Nome in some of the harshest conditions and some of the most difficult and rugged terrain on the planet Earth. The Iditarod, the last great race, is still underway in Alaska right now. Mushers, literally as we speak, are rolling into Nome today, tomorrow, for the next few days. Now, we salute all the mushers and their dogs, the athletes. These dogs are great athletes, for their hard work. And we're particularly proud this year, for the first time in history, 3 women, Paige Drobin, Jessie Royer, and Allie Zirkle, are among the top 10 finishers in the Iditarod this year. Like all races, there's a winner. And Mr. President, our Alaskan of the Week, you see a great picture of him and his dogs here, is the winner. After 9 days, 12 hours, 39 minutes, 6 seconds on the trail at 3:39 a.m. yesterday morning in Nome, Alaska, Bethel resident Peter Kaiser crossed the finish line in Nome to win this year's Iditarod. This win is also historic, Mr. President, for a number of reasons. Pete is the first person from Bethel, Alaska, to win the race. He's the 5th Alaska native to win and the first Alaskan of Yupik descent to take the title. A crowd was there waiting for him. It seemed like half the town of Bethel was there waiting for him, and they were chanting, "Way to go, Pete! Way to go, Pete," as he crossed the finish line. Alaska Native dancers performed, hugs and tears of joy all around. His wife, Bethany, was there, and their 2 children, Ari Joseph and daughter Allie, were also there. Mr. President, now this is also exciting because of the race's historic roots. So before I talk about Pete for a little bit, let me take you back to a remarkable piece of history that happened in Nome, Alaska in 1925, when diphtheria serum was desperately needed in Nome for several very sick children. Now, 1925, Alaska, the nearest batch of serum was 1,000 miles away in Anchorage. There weren't, and unfortunately still aren't, any roads between Nome and Anchorage. Matter of fact, Alaska has almost 200 communities that don't have any roads connecting it to other places. There were no commercial airlines back then. The nearest train station in Nome was roughly 700 miles away. So in the winter, people traveled mostly by dog sled. So on the night of January 27th, 1925, musher Wild Bill Shannon tied a 20-pound package of serum wrapped in a protective fur around his sled. He and his 9 dogs started this hundreds of miles journey, the Great Race of Mercy, it was called back then, across the frozen Alaska land. The entire nation was watching. This was reported in newspapers all across America. Now, Wild Bill went for some time, and miles later, he met up with another racer and another team of dogs. And this relay of dog mushers carrying the serum for the sick kids in Nome continued until the life-saving serum reached Nome 5 days later. Pretty remarkable. That original race, as I mentioned, in 1925, began to be reenacted with some twists in 1973. No relays, just one musher and his dogs running the whole route. And it continues today in honor of that life-saving mission that happened, Save the Kids, by the way, in Nome, gosh, almost a century ago. And what a race it is. The mushers face frostbite, howling winds, and blizzards. They risk getting lost in the great Alaskan wilderness. In fact, they risk their lives along the way. Entering the race at all requires fierce determination. But, Mr. President, winning the race, like Peter Kaiser just did, requires even more than determination. It requires years of grueling training, it requires guts, and it requires an Alaskan-sized heart. That's what Pete Kaiser has. So let me tell you a little bit about Pete, our Alaskan of the Week and the 2019 Iditarod champ. He's 31 years old. He was born and raised in Bethel, and he traces his mushing roots back to his great-grandfather, who came into the country as a gold miner and made extended trips with his dog team from the interior part of the state to Bristol Bay. His great-grandfather met and married a beautiful Yupik woman who had been raised in an orphanage, and that was his great-grandmother. He grew up with dogs. He and his sister loved mushing. When Pete was in college, he decided what he really wanted to know everything about dogs that he could, and that passion turned into dog mushing full-time in the great state of Alaska. According to him, that mushing, that determination, that hard work gave his life focus and purpose. Pete has won another race, Bethel's Kuskokwim 300, 4 times in a row, and has run every Iditarod since 2010, placing 5th 3 different times. But this year, he won it all, took the gold. And this was not an easy year on the trail, Mr. President. In 2017, it was one of the coldest Iditarods on record. Most of the trail, most of the time out there was 30, 40, maybe even 50 below zero. Very cold, very dark. This year, interestingly, was one of the warmest. The lack of snow in some areas presented challenges. One area of the trail, almost 80 miles on what we call tussocks, or rolling tundra, was in many areas without snow. It was like mushing over bowling balls, said Pete after he won. But he kept his cool and ran a strategic, determined race. And importantly, he knew the area. While other mushers trained in the more urban areas, he stuck with rural Alaska where the trail really gets rough, and he knew how to handle it. He husbanded his strength and power of his dogs to maneuver into position on the Bering Sea coast towards the end of the race. It was there, as other teams faltered, that he charged to victory, besting a good friend of his by just minutes, one of the closest finishes in Iditarod history. Mr. President, I had the opportunity to call Pete yesterday to congratulate him. He said at the end, dog tired, it was all a blur. They don't sleep much for almost 9 days. And speaking of dogs, he said his champion dogs were eating a lot right now and getting a well-deserved rest. You can see some of these beautiful dogs who, by the way, they love to run. They love to run. Mr. President, in Alaska, our Iditarod winners are like rock stars. Overnight, they become very famous. Pete will be no different. He will be an inspiration to so many, partly because of his hometown and humble roots. Another longtime musher and Pete's hero, Myron Angston, said that most local mushers aren't sponsored. They're not wealthy. They don't have a family kennel already established. But Pete's success will inspire others. And Pete agrees. When a reporter asks him what his victory means for his community and for smaller towns in Alaska, he says that it shows that somebody from out in the rural parts of the state can have a dream and put it all together and work hard to make things happen like this. Inspiring words, Mr. President, and I'm sure we'll see a new generation of mushers heeding Pete's call and jump into the field as a result of his example and his success. So thank you, Pete, for reminding all of us with enough hard work, grit, guts, determination, any kid from any small town or any village can follow his dreams to make it a reality. So congratulations again to you and your wonderful, hard-working dogs on being the 2019 Iditarod champ, and congratulations for being our Alaskan of the Week. I yield the floor.